regular meeting, December, last meeting of the year. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
States of America and to the republic stands nation under God, liberty.
With liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First order of business, we have Jerry Barron Jr. is absent tonight. I have his proxy. We have Mike Abb, Jerry Hover, Sandy Fosdick, Jan Sims, and Doug McCash are Zooming. Did I miss anybody?
Joan.
Okay. The first order we normally have at this time, changes or additions to the agenda. We have none. Celebrating success. I have something that I would like to say at this time. I would like to recognize all 400 plus employees of the POA, all the way from the part-time summer employees up to and including the COO, who is basically on call 24/7. You have endured unexpected setbacks in 2020 and still found a way to have a very solid financial year in the face of extreme adversity. You have found innovative ways to keep the amenities available to the membership while keeping us all as safe as we are allowing you to do. For this, we say thank you. We appreciate you. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we look forward to working with you in 2021. To the membership, thank you for adapting to the changes made necessary by this plague. At some point, we will be able to shake hands and see each other smile again. Until then, consider takeout meals, reservations for exercise, and no shotguns for golf as the small price we pay to keep each other safe. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, stay safe, and see you in 2021. Thank you. Okay. Do we have a celebrating success? We do not have a celebrating success. We will move directly then to the approval of the minutes. The first one is November 19th, regular monthly board meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Mary motions to approve those minutes.
I'll second them.
Dave Welch will seconds. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hands.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I believe it is unanimous. The next minutes, December 10th, work session. Who wants to make a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Tia makes the motion. The second?
Second.
Mary will second that. Are there any questions there? No questions, we will move to the vote. All those in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Next up, Joint Advisory Committee reports. Lakes?
We don't have anybody from the Lakes here, correct? Nobody from the Lakes here? Lakes, we encourage you to read through the minutes of the Lakes Committee meeting, but they did spend quite a bit of time discussing, kind of doing a recap of what has been accomplished by the committee over the last 2 years, the number of changes that they have made to the boating regulations to improve safety for our property owners. So I encourage you to go read through that. They've actually accomplished quite a bit, and on behalf of the board, I thank them for their efforts over the last 2 years.
Yes, they put a lot of work into that, and I feel that they've got a reasonable solution. Next up, recreation had no meeting in December, and golf had no meeting in December. So I'm guessing we're not going to have a report. Next up is financial reports, and we've always got financial reports. Stacy?
All right, can you hear me? Oh, sorry, Timmy. I'm going to step out of the way here so I can pull my mask down. So, mixed it up a little bit this month, coming into year end. We wanted to talk about November, and we'll talk about year to date as well. So we're going to start out with the POA on November, and remember the financial reports are in the presentation, will be on the website. We will also add the additional financials we normally do, but with the board meeting being a week early, those are going to have to follow. So they'll be out there later. So let's talk about November. So November, as we told you last month that our expenses would be going up. If you see in the top left-hand box, our revenue, our cost of goods sold, and our gross profit are all well above budget for the month. Revenue, we came in at 1.6 versus a budget of 1.4. Cost of goods sold was 82 versus a budget of 87. Our gross profit came in at 1.48 versus the budget of 1.28. And then our operating expenses were over. They came in at 1.6 versus a budget of 1.3. And our EBITDA then, because of the expenses, came in at a negative 112 versus a budget of a negative 6. So operating and EBITDA were both off a little bit for November as expected. If you look at the box right below that, you can see the operating expenses. Just to kind of reiterate what we've talked about, you can see the first part of the year where our expenses were lower. We held back as we went into COVID and all of the challenges. And now as we've come out towards the end of the year and our revenue is looking good, we're catching up on some of those expenses. So I really think we're going to see December look very similar to November if the weather holds. I think our revenue, our costs, and our profit's going to be good, and I think we may have some challenges in our expenses as we finish out the year. If you move over to the right and you look at the EBITDA slide, that is very similar to what we just talked about, but you can see in the red line where our 2020 actual EBITDA is just slightly below budget, but still well above last year. So having a good year, and we'll talk about that here in a second. The box at the bottom, those are just some of the key call-outs. So from a revenue standpoint, our golf was up 99,000, cart rentals were 24, and green fees were 66. The RV park had a really good November. They were up 15,000, sold out Thanksgiving. Our lot sales are up 59,000. They had a judicial sale, and they also had 8,000 in online sales. Our legal fees were up 20,000. Doug had a multi-lot judgment he's working on there. And then, of course, F&B still has its COVID challenges, and they were down 18 at Lake Point and 11 at Bar and Grill. And that's on the revenue. On expenses, same story that we talked about last month. Salaries and employee benefits are up 43,000. Hourly wages are up 21, and our health is up 18. And then we're down because of our expenses being up in several areas. Some of those being equipment and tools are at 84,000 for the month. 34,000 of that was in Cisco routers and firewalls that were obsolete. We had to update. Maintenance and repairs were down 58. 10,000 of that was in water heaters for the Branchwood area. Supplies were off by 35. We had 15 in fishery catch-up, 5,000 in pro shop fixtures, and some easy picker discs. And professional services is off because of stump dump. So that's just some of the bigger expenses that we saw come through for November. If you move to the top, in the top left-hand box, we talked about Thanksgiving. I think this was an idea of somebody on the board, and it was a great idea. But the Thanksgiving Day meal, Lake Point had pre-orders of 189 meals, and then Lake Point Restaurant had 163 meals. Lake Point revenue was $7,500 for the day, and last year they were at $6,800. And then the Bar and Grill had 190 meals that day at $4,400 versus $2,400 last year. So they had a very strong Thanksgiving. And then the other box I have up there is just kind of a keep an eye on this prepaid assessment. So in 2020, or in 2019, we had 14,805 accounts with a prepaid balance of 390,000 at the end of November. If you look at December, it's a little misleading for 2020 because we have 14,656 accounts. Even though the dollars are more, we had an assessment increase, so we're seeing about 150 accounts less that are prepaying, which is part of our cash issue this year, or this month. So we don't know if that is just a combination of people prepaid at the beginning of 2019 and their prepayment ran out early because of the assessment change, and they're probably holding out and gonna catch up again in January. Or is there a trend changing? Is there a COVID issue? We don't really know, but something we're kind of keeping our eye on, and we'll have more information going into January as to kind of what's going on with prepaids. So talk about the loan. So our intercompany water loan, as projected, we had to borrow in November. We borrowed $456,000. Part of this is due to the prepaids, part of it's the expense, and part of it's receivables that we'll talk about in a minute. I still project we're going to end about 2.75. Again, some of that's going to be weather, some of that's what happens with prepaids and receivables as we go into the end of the year. So a lot of moving factors there. But again, if you remember, we started at 3.5 at the beginning of the year. Our goal was to be at 3.2 at the end of the year, so we'll still end well below what our goal was for the year. Okay, so November receivables and the cash dashboard. I want to talk about this as just kind of an education, I guess. If you look at the top left-hand corner, or let's look at the bottom left-hand corner first, the accounts receivable aging boxes. You can see our collections team is doing a good job of kind of keeping us current year over year. But then when you go into the buckets of the 60 to 180, 180 to 365, and over 365, you can see how we're increasing each one of those this year compared to last year. A lot of that's COVID, a lot of that's in payments and other things, and a lot of it's just delayed payments. Also, with assessments going up, your receivables go up. So if you have the same number of people, it's just you have more receivables. The issue with it is, if you look at the bad debt expense on the right, you can see September, October, November, our bad debt expense is climbing. So as we move into the 61 to 365 day buckets, we have to start writing off part of our receivables as not being collectible. So we're saying as it ages, we don't have as much that we can collect. So as we move into 2021, my concern is that we could continue to see some of these receivables go up and our bad debt go up and our cash come down because of that. One of the things we're doing, we've talked about this a little bit before, is we have a project going on called the Over 365 bucket, which is the big bucket. Accounting's working with legal, and we've got 2,600 member accounts in that bucket right now. We've reached out to 325 of those just in November. And of the 325, we had a 6% return rate for bad addresses that we're having to work. But we did have 12 payments that were $9,500 in a couple week period there. We had 4 or 5 payment plans, and we now have 17 people that are working with legal to see about relinquishing their lots back to legal so that they can resell them. So there is some wins in that as well, but it's going to be a big project that will keep going over the course of the next year. What's that? We've only been able to reach out so far to 325. We've got a whole list of them. Some of them we haven't heard back from, so we're going to have to go to the next step of going to either outside collections. We're going to make some phone calls first, see if we can get some payment plans, and we just kind of have a progression. And this is just who we've heard from, and so we'll just keep moving through it. Did you have a question?
If you don't mind, do we know what percentage of those are resident and non-resident?
Most of them, resident, non-resident, no, but I can get that for you. But most of them are
You know,
lots,
it's
so.
like somebody somewhere else around
Yeah.
unimproved lots, yeah.
And there's a lot of multi-lots in there.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I think all of them pretty much are unimproved lots.
okay. Thank you.
And so there's probably a good portion of those that are non-residents.
It would seem for sure somebody else is already on that.
Yeah.
Other issues going on.
Right, exactly. So anyway, just kind of an eye-opener of what we got going on. I think it's kind of a late bloomer to the COVID issue that we have possibly, but we'll be watching that next year. And then, of course, you ask, okay, so expenses are up, receivables are up, what's our cash looking like? So the top corner or top box, you'll see that red line is our 2020 cash, and it's continued to climb, no cash issues. October, we were sitting at $5 million. November, we're at $3.8 million, and that's consolidated. We did make the extra $1 million bond payment, and that's what brought us down in November. And so we will see that go out the door. It's actually in our bank account, and we make the payment in January. So that's kind of our receivables. It's just kind of an eye-opener. Just want to make you aware of what's going on. All right, so POA year-to-date numbers. A lot of the same story we've seen before. Our revenue's looking great. We're at 18 million versus the 18,018,245 versus 18,082. Our variance is 163,000. Cost of goods sold, a variance of 128,000. Labor, I broke that out because there's always a little bit of talk about that, but our labor is to the good of 513,000. Our expenses are to the good of 586, and of course EBITDA, which is the bottom line and the big number, we're at a positive 878. So all of those are highlighted in yellow. All of them are positive. We're hitting on all of our numbers coming into year end. So it's a great year. If you look to the right, I just did some call outs on some key ones. Revenue impact, the golf greens are up 343,000 golf overall, and we're down on the KFSM line for our revenue. Our boat registration fees are up 57,000. Our motor boat rentals are up 56. RV storage fees are up 29. Our RV park full service is up 23, and overall the RV income's up 49. Again, same story for the month. Food and beverage is down 352. Facility use is down 74. All of this is with restrictions for COVID in those areas. On the expense side, our total salaries and wages are better than budget by 513,000. Employee benefits are better by 244. Membership, training, and travel is better than 50, and our utilities are better by 107. Some of the areas we're over, kind of the same as always. Professional services, the stump dump is 229 of it. Equipment and tools, again, we had the Cisco routers and firewalls that we talked about a minute ago. Maintenance and repairs, we had an irrigation and pump replacement earlier this year. And then, again, another call out that we do anticipate additional expenses in December. Our payables sitting on the books are still high, and I think some of those will get paid out in December as we close out invoices and projects. So one thing that we added to talk about tonight is capital and where are we at coming into the end of the year. So 2020 capital updates. Our pickleball courts. So I know Joan's on, so she may have extra she wants to add to this. The fencing has been removed, and all the design planning and court layout has been begun, and the contractor and weather has kind of delayed it a little bit, but she's on it, and I know that they're moving forward with it. The country club roof, it's completed, and we're waiting on insurance to finalize that. The Metfield parking lot is complete, and we're finalizing that. And then the Great Plains upgrade, that's accounting software, and then we've delayed that just until after year-end close, that we don't want to try to do them both at the same time. 2020 other projects, we have a couple of those we have going on that we're really, we got the money from the grant, and we're going to talk about the grant in January, but we've used some of the money for these projects. The dog park, one of those, and where the clearing is done, and the fencing is supposed to start next week. And miniature golf, the carpet's received, the bridges are painted, and the features will be delivered by the end of the year. So those are moving forward nicely as well. The last chart I have on here is to the left, and can you go back, Tom? Oh, okay. So anyway, so I worked with the guys, and they went out and got me some pictures. And so the Highlands Clubhouse, it's a deck project they have going on out there right now. Thought it'd be fun to share some pictures, and that's what the deck is looking like. It's done, and it's been added onto the Highlands Clubhouse. And then here's the Scottsdale deck expansion, and so it's not done yet, but they have the flooring down. And I saw another picture today. They got the railings up, and it's looking good too. So we'll see a final one in January. So can you go back 2 slides? Real quick, I did want to call out the 2020 year-to-date gross profit by revenue stream. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I know we talk a lot about general income, golf ops, food and beverage, recreation, and I just want to make sure as we go into the end of the year that we're also recognizing that there's a lot of other areas that kind of make up the whole pie for all the revenue at the POA. And so you can kind of see it's smaller pieces of it, but you know, we have the legal, we have lakes and parks, the advertising income, collections, maintenance, and construction. So there's several other pieces in there that don't get talked about a lot, so I just wanted to make sure from an education standpoint for the membership, they see all the pieces of the income that we have going on. Okay, now you can flip through. Okay, water. So moving into water for November. And again, our financials are on the website, so feel free to go out and see those, and we'll have additional financials out there when they're complete. So water for the month of November had a good revenue. Our actuals came in at 759 versus a budget of 715. Our cost of goods sold, our actual was 187 versus budgeted 200. Our gross profit was 572 versus a budget of 515. Operating expense, same story as the POA. Actual was 362 versus a budget of 234. Project catch-up, you can see it down in the bottom chart as well. Same trend as what we have with the POA. And our EBITDA actual was 210 versus a budget of 280. So off a little bit on expenses and EBITDA, but you'll see again, we're having a strong year when we get there. On the right-hand side, the EBITDA chart's the same as the POA. You can see where our EBITDA for the year for 2020 actual is over the 2019. It's a little under for 2020, but it's still, it's solid throughout the year. Not sure what I'm gonna do for charts next year because it won't be as pretty in January. And then at the bottom, you can see the revenue and the expenses. So revenue, water sales are up 23, and capital buy-in fees are up 37 for November. Our expenses, fuel and oil, were under budget by $1,000, and employee benefits by 4. And then some of the areas that they were over, supplies, 102. We had water meters and parts. Of course, water sales are up, so expenses are up. Equipment and tools, they had some chop saws and other supplies that they needed. And maintenance and repairs. They needed the pump and repair parts as well. So a couple statistics that Charlie gave me I thought were interesting. Gallons sold through November. In 2020, we had 381, and in 2019, we had 328. And if you look at the top, new water service through November of 19, we had 191, and through November of 2020, we're at 365. And then leaks repaired through November of 19, we had 328. And through November of 2020, we have 381. So the water department's busy. Okay, so let's talk year-to-date for water. So year-to-date, revenue, they're over by 1.21 million. Cost of goods is good by 50,000. Labor, they're good by 15. Expenses are a little bit over by 279, but when you look at revenue and what they're doing, it's, it's expected. And our EBITDA is up by 981,000, so almost $1 million. So having an outstanding year. The gross profit, we talked a little bit about this, so I thought it'd be kind of a neat picture to look at. But if you look at the gross profit on the bottom, you can see where the gross profit was for 2019, and then the top line is 2020. So the gross profit's consistently been higher in 2020, running, in the 70s this year versus in the 60s last year. So big difference. Revenue impact. So water sales are up 537,000, new connections 348, water capital buy-in fees 408, and then gain and loss on surplus are 41. Those are the big ones. Some of the things they're under is intercompany sales. Of course, the POA's utilities are doing good, so their intercompany water is off. Water late fees are down, and miscellaneous. And then on the expense side, their sales and wages are up by 15, or better than budget by 15. Employee benefits are better by 46. Membership, training, and travel by 8, and fuel and oil by 15. Some of the areas they're over, which is expected, is supplies, 231,000, water installation equipment. Equipment and tools, power tools and chop saws we talked about, and maintenance and repairs, some large pumps and added repair parts. So some of the same stuff that we talked about. And then capital updates. So we don't have a lot of capital right now in water. Most is closed for the year. But the Highway 340 Sugar Creek relocation, construction started, completion dates pending, and I think it's early January is what I heard. And then the Highway 340 BPS electrical renovation has not been started. All right, so let's talk a little bit about EBITDA. This is a slide that we've looked at before. As you can see, we've got more departments that are behind on EBITDA. General income, food and beverage, IT, clubhouses, membership, accounting, and communication and marketing. And then you can see the other ones that are well above EBITDA. So, but as a department, water's up by 982, and the POA is up by 878. So consolidated, we're over by 1.9 million. So the last thing, I wanted to end on a holiday note, and I just wanted to make sure everybody remembered that Lake Point is having their Christmas dinner pickup. Pre-order meals by December 18th. Pick up at Lake Point December 23rd from 3 to 7. Don't ask me questions about the menu. That's a Tommy question, but it's roasted turkey and ham, garlic, green beans with red pepper, truffle-infused whipped potatoes, and then, of course, a dessert. So the phone number's on there, and if you haven't ordered, then make sure you do because it will be an outstanding meal. So that's the financials for November. Any questions?
I have a question about when you were talking about it just being POA, the first couple slides, right before that, we talked about a water loan, because November and December, we know we have to, we're
Right.
going to. But then the next slide says, we're hitting all of our metrics. So as I'm thinking as a member, I understand that because I look through all of the documents.
Right,
But as a
right.
member, how do you help explain that where we can still be doing so great, even though we just said we're borrowing from water? It seems contradictory, but
Right. So
How do we help
from a
that?
year-to-date perspective, then we are doing. Let me see how I can explain this. We are doing great. If you want to jump in, Tom, feel free. Because we're hitting sales and revenue, we're hitting cost, we're hitting expenses and bottom line. But from a cash perspective, because we have cash going out the door, that's a balance sheet impact. And so, P&L and balance sheet are two separate pieces. And so I guess when you look at the cash you have in the bank compared to what you have going on from a P&L perspective.
So also think of it this way. We bring in a large amount of cash early on in the year from the assessments. And then, because a lot of people prepay, and then we also have a lot of people that pay monthly. And then during the summertime, we bring in a tremendous amount of money from golf and all the other amenities. But during the wintertime, during November, we have very limited revenue, but we have still a lot of expenses because we have to operate the place. So that's why we tend to be very cyclical with our cash flow, because there's certain times during the year where our revenue is very high, summertime, a lot of golfers, a lot of people at Blowing Springs, and then there's certain times during the year where it's the opposite of that. And that's what November is. So we're doing very well, and so that's why Stacy was pointing out, our loan was started at 3.5. Our
Yeah,
target
big
was
impact.
3.2, and we're actually going to be about 2.728 when we're all done. So we're actually going to beat our goal by $500,000. That's really outstanding.
would it be safe to say that with the history of the past couple of years and what we have to borrow in November, December, we're borrowing less and kind of getting on a track where maybe eventually we won't have to be that cyclical? We could not depend on water?
Well, I think we're always going to.
Far future.
I think that, well, first of all, it's hard to compare to 19 simply because you have the Trafalgar fire expenses dramatically impacting 19. I think we're always going to our cash flow is always going to be cyclical. Now, our goal is to steadily decrease the amount of loan, and we've done that in the 21 budget. But still, within that decrease, we're going to have a cyclical nature. You can't get a lot of people to play golf in November. And you don't want to go to people and say, no, don't pay us your assessments in January. Hold on to them all the way till November. You don't want to do that either. You want them to pay in advance and pay on time. And so we're always going to be cyclical in nature. Most businesses are. But our goal is to constantly bring that loan balance down. And that's also why Stacy's focusing on year end. Because of the cyclical nature, to compare one month to another month within a year is really challenging. But to compare year end to year end, that's a fair apples to apples comparison.
Then Stacy, I guess my question would be to you, with what you've learned about our finances, do you think we're ever going to get to a point where we can have enough cash to sustain the POA side without water borrowing?
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, if you look at what we paid back
Yeah.
just this year, I think that there's definitely an opportunity. We were there at one point, and I think we'll get back there. I mean, it's been a great revenue year. I think if you look at your financials and level them out, you'll see that, the borrowing, like Tom said, is very cyclical. We waited on expenses until the end of the year. We were smart. We didn't know what COVID was going to do or anything else. And so we've held and held and held. And so, but I think if you look at it from a flat perspective, absolutely.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think it might take a couple years, but I think we're definitely on the right track.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other
Do I,
questions?
do I dare make a comment, Tia? I don't really care. We own the water company.
I know.
And I know that's kind of one of those things we've talked about. We own the water company. Who cares if we borrow money from them? When we borrow money from them, we pay them back at prime or some function or factor of prime. So we own the water company. I really don't care because what we're doing is providing amenities to our people and our residents. Sure, I'd love to see us not have to do that, but I don't care. We own the water company. And if we have to borrow money from them, so be it. And that's just the way we do business. And again, I don't care. That's opening a can of worms that people don't like to hear, but I don't really care about that. We own the water company, and if we need the money, we borrow it from them. We pay them back. And we're paying ourselves interest. So we're making money from our own loans. Does that make any sense?
It really does. It really does. I do understand
So-
it completely. It's just kind of like, do you want to put your Christmas on a credit card, or do you want to save it from January monthly to not have to put it on a
That's
credit
the
card?
American way.
But, and I think what we want you to focus on also on is, and you'll see that Stacy gave a very balanced report. I mean, when she's talking about receivables, that's not great news, but it's expected given COVID.
Yeah.
But on the positive side, both the POA and the water are having a very good, strong financial year. Now, she's given us multiple warnings. December, our expenses are going to be up because we're racing to try and catch up those projects that we delayed earlier in the year. And we're trying, so we're going to be over on expenses in December. We know that. But as a whole, we've had a tremendous year, and compared to a lot of businesses that are really struggling, we're very fortunate, and we've been able to get those projects that we deferred, get them done, as opposed to not doing them at all, which would have been really unfortunate.
Yeah. And I don't mean for my questions to sound like I'm complaining I'm
no.
forward-looking years. I cannot say enough about how great the departments have done with our budget and finances this year. It's been amazing to see what 2020, this is not where I thought we'd be if you had asked me in April. So it's amazing.
We cut out so much from the budget because we fully anticipated it would be a tough year. It's turned out to be quite a bit better of the year than we thought, but we cut out a ton from the budget. Now, the good news is we were able to cut a ton out. The bad news is you can see it. You can
God, put it
see
back
it.
someday.
And that's why we're scrambling to get those things caught up before the end of the year, so that you don't see it.
The one item that I'd like to comment on that I've been keeping an eye on is the assessments that are not coming in and what we're doing to pursue that, the efforts that are being made to get our membership up to date, continue to bring down the numbers of non-paying lots. And there are, as Stacy mentioned, there are a number of ongoing efforts, and I'm watching that closely to see how that works out, particularly because of the COVID situation, but just in general, because we don't want to have people owning lots who do not want to be members. If they don't want the lot, we do. We have people standing in line who want to buy lots. And, we'll take those lots gladly. So we're trying to reach out to them. She says some of them, we don't have current addresses. That's a problem, and it's hard to resolve. But when we can make contact with people, we can work with them. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on. And all those numbers, they're cyclical. I come from a farming background. I understand cash flow and, lean and, boom and bust. So it doesn't bother me at all that we borrow money one time of the year, and another time of the year there's money coming out our ears. It's just a part of life. So that being said, let's move on. We'll
I just
never
have
get out
one
of
quick
here.
comment to Tia's. I wasn't part of this, management team at the beginning of the year when all the decisions were made, But from a financial perspective, they made the right decisions, not knowing what was going to happen this year. And so by holding back on those expenses and by cutting back and not knowing, they did the right thing for the membership. And, now they're trying to do the right thing for the membership and catch up on some of that. But, you do see some big swings, but it absolutely was the right decision this year.
Good.
And I want to remind people that Stacy in her budget for 21 has increased her collection staff because we're seeing the writing on the wall, and we would rather get those additional bodies in there, get them working to keep that number under control, as opposed to let the number get out of control, and then trying to catch up. It gets so much harder. It's much easier to get a person to get current when they're $200 behind, but when they're $600 or $700 behind, it's so impossible to get them to get current. So we're hitting them early, and that's why we're sending out so many letters on our Project 365.
It's really exciting.
And one other interesting thing that we saw with the collections, some of the payment plans that we have right now due to COVID, not related to the 365, but people who were paying and are now for whatever reason can't. One of the interesting things that we've come to realize is if we tell them, you know what, just start paying your $37 now. Don't worry about all these months when you weren't working. Let's just start now so you don't fall further behind, and then we'll get a payment plan after the first of the year on what's missing. So, it's kind of an interesting dynamic, but it's really worked, and I think people are kind of feeling relieved from that. So, so hopefully we'll have some catch up there as well.
Good.
Next item on the agenda
Thank you.
is the open
Can I ask a question
forum.
first?
Comment.
Dan.
I was wondering, the people that are paying the annual assessments and the annual golf and carts, are they, is that income being recorded in a prepaid and then recorded monthly?
So
Rather than recorded in the month in which it comes in?
no, if they pay for an entire year, like in November or December, that is actually deferred revenue and it's carried into next year. And if they're making payments, we recognize that revenue as they actually use that revenue, I guess is the way to explain that.
I couldn't understand you.
We follow the accrual basis of counting, so if you prepay in December, let's say you prepay your assessments or you prepay your annual golf membership, we are going to start recognizing that revenue when we earn it in 21. We don't recognize that revenue, that prepaid revenue. It's a prepaid, it's not revenue in December.
Carried as a liability.
That make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the way it should be done. I just wanted to be sure.
Yep,
I don't
accrual
think we have
basis
any
of counting.
choice. We don't have any choice on that one, do we?
No.
Okay, I believe Tammy has a letter, an email to be read.
Yes, I do, David. It's from Jack Bartlett. Board of Directors, at the open forum portion of the November 19th, 2020 Board of Directors meeting, a letter was read that brought to the attention of the board that Chairman Brandenburg, speaking for the board regarding the removal of McKee, has violated the ex post facto retroactive provisions of the U.S. Constitution. Brandenburg's action is equivalent to backdating the effective date of the revision to Article 3 to May 14th, 2020, the date of McKee's removal. And all directors know, or should know, this would be clearly illegal. After the letter was read, Brandenburg asked Judson if he had a response. He stated that he did, and a portion of the response follows. So first of all, the U.S. Constitution governs federal law and actions taken by the government officials. It does not govern the policies and procedures of a private entity such as the POA. And as a result, Mr. Bartlett's concerns that the POA is violating the U.S. Constitution's ex post facto laws are unfounded. The POA is not violating the U.S. Constitution. Judson's position that all policies and procedures of the POA are exempt from the articles of the U.S. Constitution, which includes the Bill of Rights, is totally absurd. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the United States of America and contains the responsibilities that the government has in order to protect the rights of its citizens. And the Constitution protects all citizens from ex post facto laws. Having the COO of the BVPOA believe that any private entity is exempt from the articles of the Constitution is ridiculous, and having the majority of the members of the board believing that the POA is exempt from constitutional requirements is even more ridiculous. Would the directors that believe the POA is exempt, repeat, exempt as in not subject to, from the provisions of the Constitution so indicate by verbal consent? Since this letter addresses the board of directors that vote, would the chairman of the board who votes provide a response that recommends a course of action for resolution? Thanks for any consideration. Jack Bartlett.
Over the last 3 months, Mr. Bartlett has sent multiple emails and letters to the board rehashing effectively the same issue. His emails and letters have been addressed by the board repeatedly, and his questions answered thoroughly and completely. If Mr. Bartlett remains unclear on any issue, I encourage him to reread the numerous responses which have been provided to him. I do not feel any further response is necessary. No one signed up to speak to the board tonight in open forum, so we will move on to the next item, which is a waiver request for the 3-bid requirement. This has to do, this has to do with a project for the Kingsdale Pool. Tom, you want to explain?
So one of the projects approved for the 21 capital budget is the renovation work of the decking and so forth at Kingsdale Pool. We have a budget of $132,000. And we've talked about similar challenges before where we try and get 3 bids and we struggle to get 3 bids. We contacted 5 companies. 2 submitted bids, one for $182,000 and another one for $132,000. The other 3 companies were unwilling to bid. They felt it was out of their scope of expertise. So we are asking that the board approve that and allow management to move forward, even though we only have 2 bids and we are selecting the lower of the 2 bids.
Let me jump in here a minute, Tom. We have a golf project that's ongoing right now, and we're having a similar issue. And I've twisted the arms of a couple of golf contractors to try to get them to bid our project, our tee projects at Highlands and the Country Club. So I understand exactly where you're coming from, and this issue is the same. So I will make a motion to grant a waiver for the 3-bid policy for the Kingsdale Pool renovation project. While 5 companies were asked to submit a bid and only 2 companies ended up submitting a bid, management is recommending we select the lower of the 2 bids submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Tia seconds. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will ask for a vote. All those in favor signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Move on to the next item.
Do you mind if I jump in? You want me
Go
to?
right ahead.
Okay. If you turn to page 18 of your board packet, you'll see that we are recommending a change to bylaw Article 5, Section 2. And this is on page 20? We're recommending that, the Rules and Regulations Committee is recommending that we add a provision, and it is as follows. As a result of vacancies on the board, see bylaws Article 3, Section 6, there may be instances where more than 3 vacancies must be filled in one election. In that case, the 3 candidates who receive the most votes will each be deemed elected to a 3-year term. For each additional vacancy, the candidates with the next highest number of votes will be deemed elected to serve the term of the vacancy with the most outstanding time remaining. This change is consistent with how we have handled it previously. Several years ago, if memory serves me correctly, Mr. Director Lowry came in 4th place and served a 1-year term. And so we felt it was best to get this documented in our bylaws. Any questions?
Okay, do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve the changes to bylaws, Article 5, Section 2, as noted. This is the first of 2 required readings.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mary makes a second. Okay, now, open for discussion?
Just want to remind, I mean, this was said in the last meeting and at Rules and Regs, but just as Chair of Rules and Regs, I'd like to remind the members that this is in no way affecting anything other than the election. It has nothing to do with removing a member or a board member. It has nothing to do with any other situations or who can run or anything like that. This is simply just to put into policy something that has been common practice that was just not written down.
That is
all.
correct. Hearing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
And nobody opposed? It's passed unanimously. Next up, we have,
On page 21 of your board packet, we have a discussion about proposed trail enhancements and the proposed transfer of land to the POA. I have a short presentation to share with the membership. This is consistent with the presentation that was given last week at the work session. So we have 2 items on this agenda. The proposed improvements to the back 40 and proposed transfer of land from the Trailblazers to the POA. As I indicated last week, it's actually, the 2 parcels are under different legal names, but they're by and large controlled by the Trailblazers. So for simplicity purposes, we're going to refer to it as the Trailblazers. The first one is on the back 40. So what they're proposing is improvements in these 2 particular areas. What they've done is they've learned 2 things since the trails were open on the back 40 in 2016. First off is this section to the left, which is now in the blue and the yellow. That area is not being used quite as much, and they feel that they need to come in, add an additional trail that is very close to the existing one to make improvements to increase the usage. They have trail counters throughout our system, and they're able to track how much usage certain areas are getting used, how much trails are getting used, and they found that this one particular area is just not getting used enough. So they went back in, they did an analysis. Why are mountain bikers and why are hikers not using this area, and what can we do to improve it so they will start using that? So what I particularly like about this is that even though the trails were completed and handed over in 2016, the Trailblazers are coming back years later and going, how do we make this better? We can't assume that we're going to get it perfect on the first try, and how do we take it to the next level? The next change here is I'm going to have you look at the upper right section of the circled area. You'll see a yellow trail added there. And what they've learned in this instance is that having smaller looping areas works really well for mountain bikers and hikers. Having really large loops may work for some people, but most people want a little bit smaller loop. And notice that this really combines the 2 areas. They're both interconnected, because what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to go up through the connector and then down through the flow ride and so forth, and you will treat this as an entire loop. So while they're 2 different sections, it's really they're combined. It's kind of a package deal, if you want to call it that. In addition to the improvements on the back 40, they're proposing that they deed over to the POA 2 parcels of land. The first one on this map is in the upper section in purple, and I'm referring to it as Arkmo South. The second one, which I'll cover second, is Huntley, and it's right next to our current member services or our water department. So we'll cover Arkmo South first. So if you recall, last year the POA sold all of Arkmo, which was 366 acres. This is actually just 33 acres, and you can see there's already trails on that area. I've walked this area many times. It's a really good trail area. So they're proposing that they grant that over to us, the POA. The second section here's Huntley, and you see to the left, there's the water department. You can even see the water tower right there, and you'll see that they've purchased these 33 acres. It might actually be a little bit less than that. It might be like 29 acres that they transfer over to us. But you'll notice how the trails go in and out of the purple area. They go onto common property, they go back in, and so forth. So one thing I want to make sure that I make clear of is if you were to look at the 100 miles of soft surface trails that we have, approximately 98% of all those trails are on common property. The city also has some areas that are, some of the trails are on city land and so forth. But whether the trails are on POA property or not, the trails maintenance agreement that we entered into, we still have to maintain it. But this gives us further control over this land. And what I think is particularly interesting about this is over time, we've been trying to monetize the benefits of having the trails. I provided a report to the board. It showed that in 2015, before the back 40 opened, we brought in about $70,000 net on the bottom line at Blowing Springs, and that number is now $180,000. And a lot of that you can attribute to the use of the trails, particularly down at Blowing Springs where you have the RVers and the campers and so forth, the tiny cabin that we have. What we're trying to do in other areas is how do we further monetize it? How do we further get the benefit of these trails? Can we add additional camping areas? Could we add pavilions and rent the pavilions? Could we add concession stands? Those types of things to further monetize the trails. So not only are they a fantastic amenity, but they're also bringing in revenue, and that would be a really good thing. This particular piece of property, the Huntley property, the 33 acres was purchased a couple of years ago for $353,000. They would be deeding it to the POA for free. While we would, so I want to go back and emphasize that while there's additional trails that would be owned by the POA as opposed to maintained, the amount of money that we have allocated and are contractually required to spend on maintenance would not change. So let me look at this, a couple additional points. If the board approves the new trails on the back 40, an amendment would have to be made to the licensing licensing agreement. It would have to be made by the POA and the city. The city would have to vote on it in a public forum, in a public setting. I've had a conversation with the mayor. He indicated that he felt it would go well. Of course, he can't speak for the entire city council. With regards to the trails on Arkmo South and Huntley, once construction has been finalized, we're still going to be spending that $35,000. I tried to emphasize that point just a little bit ago. So it does not increase that $35,000 obligation that we already have. The city also has a similar $35,000 obligation. It does not increase theirs either. If the board were to approve the acceptance of the two parcels, we would also want to go to Cooper and have them authorize those parcels to become common property. There's certain protections when it's common property. We can only sell common property with a vote of the membership. Also, when it's common property, we can then add water, and the Trailblazers would like to add water to Huntley and other locations. I've had a preliminary conversation with Cooper regarding allowing these two parcels to be common property, and it's been a favorable conversation. I mentioned about the drinking water they would like to add at Huntley. We can only do that if it's common property. And finally, we've talked about how this will not increase costs for the POA, and I want to remind people of the 2020 commitment that was made, and quote, aside from current maintenance commitments, no additional commitment of POA funds will be considered for the expansion of trails until at least 2023. So that was straight from the 2020 plan brochure, and you see that this arrangement that is being proposed does not violate the commitment that the board made to the community. Questions?
Okay. First, I need a motion. Get a motion on the floor. So I have a motion for the licensing agreement. Who will make that motion?
I move that we approve the third amendment to the limited terminable license agreement with the understanding there will be no increase in cost to the POA for a period of at least 3 years. The city of Bella Vista will also have to approve this amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
David Welch will second. Okay, now is there discussion on this?
I'll pipe up here. I'm a fan of the trails. I'm a fan of refining the product. I'm a fan of reclaiming sold property and getting it gifted back to us. I think it's benefits all the way around. I know we can find ways to make it sound like, I guess this is a violation of more trails being built. I don't think so. I think this is a refinement of the product, and I feel like it'll be a benefit to that neighborhood and a benefit to the trail system and to the POA as a whole.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would like to say something. While there are a lot of people who like the trails, there are also a lot of members who do not like the trails. And everything year after year goes up in price. So while we can find someone who's willing to pay the maintenance for the next couple of years, I don't believe that $35,000 is going to last very long, in my opinion. And what happens when that $35,000 is not enough is one question that I have. And then, it's nice getting property given to us. However, with the ownership of property comes responsibility and expense. And I think over the next couple of years, we're going to have a lot of challenges that we're facing still with the stump dump fire. So I am opposed to both of these.
Sandy,
Well,
what
at this time, we're only talking about the two trails on the east side.
Okay, well, I'll repeat myself then again later.
Okay,
What expense increase are you talking about? Current, like now?
I'm talking about in the future, Mary.
Okay.
You can't add more trails without incurring additional expenses in the future. I understand that by the letter of the law, we're following the 2020 plan by not increasing our expenses today. But down the road, they will increase.
but we've made no commitment beyond 3 years.
I
And
know, David, but what are we gonna do when that $35,000 is not enough? Are we just gonna let the trails deteriorate? I'm just asking the question.
Absolutely not. We will not let them deteriorate. We'll handle that when the time comes. We take 1 year at a time, and when 3 years is done, then we'll see what happens.
Well, I think I'd like to make 2 points. A couple of comments that Joan has made is when a trail is being used at a very limited basis, it actually costs us more to maintain it. It's cheaper to maintain it when it's being used, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. With regards to the trails maintenance agreement, for each of the sections, we are obligated for $35,000. The city is also obligated for that same amount. Our obligation does not exceed the $35,000. And Joan has found that as we've gone from 40 miles to 100 miles, there's definitely some synergy in that you're able to maintain more mileage for the same amount of money. So while Sandy, you are correct, I can't predict 10, 15 years into the future, but I can feel very comfortable over the near term, over the next 5 to 6, 7 years, that we're going to be comfortably, the $35,000 will take care of that. And finally, I said there was going to be 2 points. I want to add a third one. What Joan's also been doing is she's been going through and setting us up for the future. We tend to spend a little bit more in the first year and the second year of maintaining a trail system than afterwards, because she's going through removing standing deads, getting them away from the trails and so forth. So she's setting us up for the future. So I think we're going to be, I think we're going to be set for the long haul.
I also remember a comment that Joan made about the construction of the many of the trails at this point. The trails are being built a little differently than the original back 40. They're being built to a different standard, and they are more durable, and they're lasting longer. So that's one thing that we might take into consideration, that the newer trails are being built to require less maintenance. So are there any other comments?
Yeah, I've just got one. First, to start, I am for these 2 additions. I think they're improvements to areas that are already existing. I've looked at the maps, I've seen it does not encroach on homes. To me, the number one thing to always look at is the member. How does it affect anybody close or whatever's going on next to them? And I didn't see that that is going to affect anybody in these 2 improvements in these areas. I think everybody in this room and anybody watching knows I've been very vocal about trails in the past. Not very fond of them encroaching on homes, not my home, not my friends' homes. I still don't want to see more trails being built. We're not talking about that right now. I just want to make it clear that the reason I support these, this is an improvement to what is already there to help it be maintained better, to help it get more usage, and to make it better for that area. And that I just can't be against.
Okay.
I think Jerry wanted to say something.
Jerry?
Yeah, has anyone contacted the homeowners along that trail to see what kind of current impact it would have, and when it becomes double the size of what it is currently and increases traffic, have those people been appraised of this?
Question?
No, we have not.
Was that an answer?
No, we have not contacted them.
Okay.
Jerry, I had asked that.
I have to vote no on the project. If we haven't contacted the folks, let them know what may be happening and so on. We took an awful lot of heat on the little sugar trails because people claimed they didn't know about it. And to me, the agreement is so faulty. There is so much left out of it that should be in it that I have to vote no. I'm sorry.
Jerry, I had asked Aaron Rushing in one of our first meetings what the closest to any of the homes these connectors would impact. And I believe he had said, you can correct me if you've had other conversations, that for specifically these few handful of homes on these connectors, I think it was less than 5, it was even close to, nothing encroached closer than 60 yards. Before, we had always been talking 20, and that scared me. That's a little close for comfort. I don't think there's anything closer than 60. So maybe the board wants to discuss later or now at what distance do we contact a homeowner? Because 60 yards to me feels like that's appropriate to not have to contact.
And keep in mind, most of these, well, all these areas are in valleys, so they're way down. In most cases, they're 40 to 60 feet below elevation.
If you noticed on the topographical map that, you know, they're not up on the top of the ridge where the homes are. The trails are down into the valley. So you got to go down and look over the edge to see them. So, okay, I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favor of the suggested motion to the third amendment to the limited terminable licensing agreement, signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3. Jerry Barron voted no. It passes. The next one up, the proposed transfer of the land to the POA. I need the motion first. Mary, would you read the motion?
Sure. I move that we accept the transfer of land from Gordon Hollow Holding LLC, the Arkmo South parcel, and A and 12th Street LLC, the Huntley parcel, to the POA, with the understanding there will be no increase in cost to the POA for a period of at least 3 years.
Tia.
Second.
Tia seconds that. Okay, discussion on this one?
I've just got a quick question. You had sent me the parcel numbers earlier today. One of them I looked up that was the Arkmo parcel. It was actually the parcel number for the whole 103 acres. Are they going to be changing something about that parcel? Because we're only talking about 33 of it.
Yeah, they'll have to subdivide it.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to, yeah, it is for the entire parcel, or at least the Arkansas portion of it, you're correct. But they will divide it, and I assume they'll add an additional parcel number to it.
Okay, so everything on the Arkansas side that was sold in Arkmo is included in this?
No, okay, so.
No.
So, let's
Just
go
33
back.
acres.
Okay, so, see how it's like a little L shaped here?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that is the entire Arkansas portion of property. That's all of that parcel that I showed you earlier today.
Okay.
Okay? What they're going to grant us is the lower right-hand corner. Okay, so let's go back here. So it's going to be this lower, see the red right here is where the trails are. And this is where the trails are. Does that make sense? If you
So it's
give-
just the trail section of?
Just the trail section. If I were to.
It's
give
pretty
you a
much
moment.
east of Gordon Hollow Road and in the floodplain there.
Okay.
At least most of it is. There's some that is above the floodplain.
Is it connecting to other common property? The parcel that we would be getting is connected on the sides to common, not other Gordon Hollow property?
On the east side it does.
Okay.
I'm going to pull up Benton County GIS. It might be a little bit clearer to see.
Okay.
If anybody has used GIS, it's a very useful tool.
Yes.
You can. Talking about me or the program?
Yes. There's got to be one always.
Is it easier to separate a parcel when Cooper's not involved? Because I always thought parcel lines, just from living in Bella Vista, was like crazy hard to
Okay.
change.
All right, so here is all of the Arkansas portion of Arkmo, this entire L-shaped you want to call it that. What they're talking about is, it's basically this portion right here. Does that make sense? I can
Yep.
even get fancy and draw a line in there. Basically, it looks like approximately like that, approximately. And so that gives you an idea. So that's 33 acres. Okay, so they had a lot more ins and outs on that, but it's basically following the line of the trails.
When they split that off, it'll have its own big, long number down at the courthouse.
Okay.
33.
33 acres.
.9.
At, the Huntley one is 33, but it may turn out to be 29 acres, but they're both about the fairly similar size.
Okay. Comments or questions?
I'll make a comment.
Okay.
You know, I like the idea of POA owning the properties and so on, but I'm going to have to vote no on it simply because, especially on the Huntley property, don't know any of the specifics about, are there any hazardous waste? Is it floodplain? You know, anything about the property whatsoever. And based on the various lawsuits that the board should have known these things, and we don't know them, I'll have to vote no at this point in time.
Anybody else?
I'll just repeat what I had said previously, because I thought we were taking these together, but, you know, like I said, with ownership comes responsibility and expense, and the reason that I was asking earlier, in the email about how many miles of trails are on both of the Huntley and the Gordon Hollow properties is because we will eventually have to maintain those. And I just think it would be really nice if we had an opportunity over these next 3 years or 2 years and a few months to see how the trails wear the over 100 miles that we have now, and to see where we stand financially. And I mean, I understand their desire to make this POA property because that's the only way to get water there, but I don't understand the reason why we have to acquire the property and the risk. So that's my comment, and you know, that's why I oppose it at this time.
I have an answer for that. I would say that we are responsible for maintaining those trails, whether we own the property or not. And the only way we are going to be able to generate revenue is through ownership. So in my mind, there is no reason not to accept the gift of $300,000+ piece of property.
David,
You know,
sorry, go ahead, Mike.
well, I was just gonna say about the maintenance, like I appreciate the concern about the maintenance. The 35,000 thing was a nominal buy-in from the city and the POA to accept the trails. You know, the amount of work, you know, to chop trees and do all this stuff, and it will pale in comparison to the amount of volunteer effort that is taken, already happens every single day on the trails by your neighbors, people that you may not even know, that you claim to like or whatever else, out making Bella Vista beautiful and amazing and maintain those trails because they love and care about them. A myriad of examples you
Mike, you're breaking up.
in the golf community over the years of people taking it on their own time and dime to do things. That's what maintenance costs.
Here's on GIS, it has this helpful feature. So right here, you can see, oops, if I go right there, you'll see, there's the parcel right there. And what I've done is I've clicked on the FEMA 100-year flood zone, and you can see, so here is the flood zone. As you can see that, this is Lake Windsor, the water that feeds into there. You can see that it's not marked in that parcel right there. It's pretty hilly right there. It doesn't flood.
No, it does not flood. Not anywhere close. Okay.
Do we know what their intention is with ARCMO?
Things have been so broken up, we can't hardly hear any of the last things that either Mike or Tom said.
Mike was breaking up real bad. We had a hard time hearing him here also.
Sir, what did you say?
If he couldn't hear you, do you want to talk about the floodplain?
Jerry, what I've done is I've pulled up on GIS. Here's the parcel right here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. What I've done is I've clicked on FEMA, the 100-year flood, and you can see that the area is not marked by FEMA at all. But here's for example, here's what it would look like. The area that feeds into Lake Windsor, you can see that's flood zone. We've commented, T, I think you were about to ask about ARCMO, and you'll see that a large portion of that, ARCMO South, is in the flood zone of the section that we're looking at.
Pretty much all of it.
Other than this bottom section here, right here. Yeah. Okay, did that answer your question?
Do we know what they're going to do with the rest of the sections of ARCMO that are going to connect to what they're gifting us?
No.
That's a great question. I have not received an answer to that question. I think they're still coming up with ideas.
So they're giving us the floodplain part.
Well,
Yeah.
wow.
I had one more question. David, you indicated that we're responsible for the maintenance of the Huntley and the Gordon Hollow anyway.
correct.
I don't think I understand that. Are you saying that those parcels are already in our license agreement?
No, just the trails.
Just the
Not
trails.
the parcels, just the trails.
The trails are our responsibility.
Have we signed an agreement that says any trails in the entire city that we'll be responsible for? I thought that the other license agreements listed particular parcels.
So we do have a trails maintenance agreement for the Little Sugar section, and those trails are included.
Do we have any other parcels where the trails are at that are not POA or city-owned?
As I indicated earlier, 98% of the trails, 98% of the 100 miles are common property. You have these two sections here. You have a small amount with that is on city property. Anything else that they have easements in place, but 98% is common property.
Okay, I'm going to call for the vote then. All in favor of accepting the transfer of these two pieces of property signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
That's 7. Opposed? Jerry and Sandy, 7-2. That brings us to the end of our published agenda. I don't believe there's anything else at this time. So I will read the announcements. The board candidate informational meeting is Wednesday, January 6th at 4 p.m. here in the boardroom. It's available also via Zoom. Any candidates for the board who have completed the packet or considering completing the packet can be informed, ask questions on what's involved. The Recreation Committee will meet Monday, January 11th at 4 p.m. Zoom, and Facebook live stream only. Golf Committee, Wednesday, January 13th, 8:30 a.m. in the boardroom at the Country Club, and Zoom. The Lakes Committee is Wednesday, January 13th, 2 p.m. in the boardroom in the Country Club, and Zoom. Board of Directors GM meeting is Thursday, January 14th, 4 p.m. in the boardroom at the Country Club, and Zoom. This is a closed meeting. Board of Directors work session Thursday, January 21st, 9 a.m. in the boardroom in the Country Club, and Zoom. And the January regular monthly meeting and the board candidate lottery drawing, the announcement of the candidates for next year's election, Thursday, January 28th, 6 p.m. here in the boardroom at the Country Club, and also via Zoom. Thank you for attending. Have a Merry Christmas. Please stay safe.
Merry Christmas.